Hello class, so I am going to record the section for this week. So this week we'll start by creating our data set here. We're going to use a proc means and an output statement for this. And from this we will be able to have our averages for our 8 quizzes. From this we're going to want to transpose. And transpose is really just meaning we want to switch our x and our y axes or switch our rows to make them become columns. And we're going to just swap the rows and the columns of our proc means that we did before. Because remember, when we do our proc means, all the quizzes will be on the quiz scores for all 8 quizzes will now be on the left hand side as row names instead of column names. And if we want them to be column names, then we're going to have to use this transpose to switch the two. And of course, we could rename them. And then here we're just going to plot the two. So going to the code. So I have already typed in pretty much all the code for us just so we can talk about it. So of course I just used our lib name just because when we look at our data set, instead of using the in file, I see that I have 122 rows, which isn't that many, but I have 38 columns. And we know if I use in file, I'd have to type in every single one of these column names, remember? And I have to specify which one is and exactly how it goes. We also see that all the quizzes appear to be out of 5 points. So we know a quiz out of 5 is the max score it appears, and 0 should be the minimum. So those are all good things to know. So now going back to our data set, I'm just going to want to save this. I'm going to label it temporary. And all this is doing is keeping all of the quizzes. So I'll have quiz 1 through quiz 8. And you guys can see that here I used our keep statement. I could have used the drop statement as we've gone through earlier, but I used the keep one. And I used Q1 through QU8. So this is the same as just typing in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, Q5, Q6, Q7, and Q8. So as you can see, that saves a lot of room. And I did even mistype the one, so that saves me from making that mistake. Then I did this again. So I will use this in the future, of course. But there it is an example of what that is. Now using our proc means. Now I've noticed that some of you, well, I've got emails. Some of you are a little confused on how to use this proc mean statement. So we have our variable here, which is the variables that we want to use our mean statement on, right? We want to know the averages of all 8 quizzes, all right, guys? So that is going to be our variable that we are going to go over. And we're going to want to output this, because if we don't output this, all we're doing is looking at this information. So I'm going to label this our average quiz, and then I'm going to drop the type and frequency. That's because the proc mean statement adds in this type and frequency. And I want to know the mean of all of 8 of the variables. Now I could just have this be Q1, and I will run this and show you guys what it looks like. So here is the proc mean statement, just everything. So this is the first statement, but the output data, we just have the average for Q1. So this results here that we see here is at first it does the proc mean for this. So our statement up here, so it gives us all the features. So I'll add the mean to that. So next time we see when we run the Q1, our outputted data, which is now our work average underscore quiz, just has the first value. But if I want to have all of them, I'll need Q1 through Q8. I'll run this again. And I'll now see that I have just the same thing here just because I added, remember, the mean statement up at the top. So that means only calculate the mean. Then I now have our 8 quizzes here. And this is very interesting because if I want to plot this, our X now is all the different quizzes, and I want the Y to be the other. So I'm going to have to transpose this. So that's the proc transpose statement. And I'll print out the database of average quizzes just so you guys can see. So this is what it looks like. So now I'm going to transpose it. And we'll see. So the transpose function is we have our proc transpose, the data we want to transpose, the output of what we want to transpose and just run. We're going to run this, and we see that it just gives us a name in column 1, and we can of course rename this if we wanted to, but as you guys can see, this is a lot easier to look at and just a lot easier to analyze. Instead of having to scroll across and compare them, we can just look downwards and see that over time in general, the quiz average decreases. And we can examine that to see maybe if there's a reason why. We could group this up further, but those are our main statements. And to remember, we had our output out statement in our mean. We had to put that equal to the amount of what we wanted to take the mean of. That's what we did right here. So now we're going to have the SG plot. So I'm just going to run it real quick just so you guys can see it first, and then I'll explain. So I'll first just explain. So we see that we go downwards. Quiz 3, people see they're not doing super good. They try really hard for quiz 4. And the average decreases again all the way to quiz 8. Now, this does not mean you guys are going to have 8 quizzes. Do not want you guys to get worried about that. This is something completely different. But we see we had this line right here, which I put at 4.4, which will be our global average of the quizzes. And that's just the overall mean, and this is called the reference line. And I've also had our markers, our default for the markers, we'll have that set to, I've set our markers here. So our markers are in this thing, sorry. So here I used a series plot. I could have also used a scatter plot, but that would change different things around. So I'll first just show the series plot. Sorry, I have to put results. So the series plot adds this line in for us. So if we wanted to have a series, we would add this line in. Now, if I wanted to have just the dots, I would have just a scatter plot. Or if I wanted to have a bubble plot to show the size, I would use a bubble plot. The larger the bubble, the higher or the more often or the larger that number is based on the grouping. And remember before that I had our quizzes below. We knew what they were. We had Q1 through Q8, but this was just called name. So to change that, I had our x-axis and then label. So this labels our x-axis, which was our variable name in the other data set, and I named it quiz number. Then our y-axis label is labeled the average, and that is the average for that quiz. Then of course this reference line here is just supposed to be the global average. So if I didn't want to have the label, so I'll comment this out. You guys. So I want to move that in there. Just so when I run it, put it in there, it'll still run. We see now that the global average comment on the side is gone, but we still have this reference line here. So that reference line just adds a spot or adds a horizontal line at 4.4. That's because I specialized it at 4.4. Now we'll move that and we'll see that it'll add the global average back in. We can see that it adds right here. And we can of course move this if we want to change it. And then we also have our marker attributes here. So if I want to talk about our marker attributes, and this is either the dots that we have in the line, I'll need to start with our markers. And I want our markers to have a smooth connect. That's just because that is what it's asked for. So the smooth connect is very smooth. It's curved fit to just have the curve. But if I did not want that, I would delete the smooth fit here. Now we see it's a lot more jagged. It's just connecting each point and just drawing a line between the two, not a smooth connect. So I'll add the smooth connect back in, because that is what it is being asked of us. Now I have our marker attributes. So this is what I want our marker attributes to be. So I could have changed the color, I could change the size, I could change the font. But right here, I'm just talking about the symbol. And here we're setting it to diamond. I could have this be circle filled. Circle filled. And there's a couple different options. And of course I could change the different type of circles. So circle filled is one, and we see that it's a filled circle. Or I could just change it to circle. And we see this is unfilled. So now we're in a circle. We could also make these transparent. So if we wanted to put some words in there, we could make them larger and more transparent. That's effective when if we want to look into the bubble. I don't know if we'll have time to get into that in this class, so I'm going to leave that out. But the main takeaways are we have our series, and the series adds the line. And I'll also show you just a scatter plot. So we have scatter. The scatter will work well with this. And we'll run, and we still see that our scatter that is all important. Got to make sure you have your semicolons and everything. So our scatter plot just has our dots out there. And we can see that from our scatter plot, it doesn't have the line connecting it, but the series does. So it's a different type of plot. This could be useful if we don't know if there is a trend, or if we want to see if we could say, okay, right now we can see there's a lot more higher datas above our global average earlier on and farther later on. So we see that there's a downward trend, and having our series, just changing it to series, back to series, we see that this adds the line back in. And we can see that that line there does exactly what we see. And we see that even now we don't have our marker attributes, that the diamond or the circles are now gone, and it's just connecting. So those are another important thing to look at. And we'll just go over the syntax for this one more time. So our proc SG plot, and that's the main type of plot we'll have. And we start with our data. And I use the transpose data. And then our what type of plot we've gone over series and scatter. And all of the attributes are pretty much the same. And then we have our column here that will be on our x-axis, and the column that'll be on our y-axis. So our x-axis, I had the name. That was our Q1 through Q8 for the 8 quizzes. And the y-axis, I have the column 1, which in this case was the quiz score, or the average of the quiz. And then our reference line here. So after this, we had our marker attributes. Remember, marker. First, before marker, I need a backslash. So marker, markers, then it was smooth connect. And then I believe I have marker attributes, and then it was symbol equals diamond, and we want it filled. A in diamond. And if I want it filled, I'll have the filled symbol, and I believe this is pretty much exactly what they're asking for. Now our diamonds are filled. And one other thing they ask for is their global average to be the exact mean. So this isn't the mean, this is just something close. So I will do proc means to figure out the average. Data equals average underscore quiz underscore transpose. And I'll just run it and add the mean. That should give us the value here. And we see it's 4.236. I'll show that again. So it's 4.4236. So I'll do 4.424. So this is pretty much our exact value. And I'll run this. And now the global average is now the true global average, but it's just slightly higher. So I eyeballed it first of all, but now I just showed you how to get it if you were wondering. And that is definitely important to know. And remember, this proc transpose is useful because we were able to put this in. And of course, we can now rework on this. So if we wanted to keep or drop some variables, we could do that. But that would not be important just because that's not useful just because we have so few. So I think that is it. Yep. So thank you guys. And